Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Unit 2, Poetry. This is obviously the second unit that we're doing in our course of the 4 units plus a culminating. So you are 20% done, which is great. You're that much closer to having your grade 12 college English credit. This unit will be a short one, only 4 actual classes, so it's a little more compressed than some of the other units that we're doing. Just want to call your attention here to the unit overview, detailing exactly what we're doing in the unit. So we're gonna be doing, taking a look at what makes a poem, as opposed to other pieces of writing. What makes a poem different from a short story, which makes it different from a novel, a drama study, etc. I'm going to take a look at the 6 poetic devices. You'll see these are quite similar to the elements of a short story. So if you have a good comprehension from our short stories unit of the elements of a short story, you'll see the similarities and commonalities between these two. Take a look at, again, we're going to take a look at the writing process, look at a couple different types of writing than we did in the express and reflect part in short stories. And again, you're going to be going through poems, deconstructing poems for these elements, leading up to a couple different assessments. The major assessments for this unit will be a test on poetry, very similar to the last test that we did on short stories, where we're going to give you a poem and ask you to go through the poem and deconstruct it for the 6 poetic devices that we're going to be talking about for the next 3 or 4 days. You will do a written analysis of poetry, same kind of idea. I might give you 1 or 2 poems and get you to go through them and deconstruct them for the elements. And then you're going to do your big summative for this unit is a poetry portfolio. That's going to be introduced in lesson 2, where you will bring together a whole bunch of stuff that is poetry. You're going to find some poems, examples of poems in the media. You may write a poem of your own, answer some questions. It's just kind of it's designed to allow you a little bit of freedom and pull together a whole bunch of different aspects of poetry. And that'll be obviously due at the end of this unit. So we'll jump into the first lesson. So here we're going to have given you what we call the poetic devices, the different elements of poetry. A couple things about poetry in general before we begin. Poetry is the language of emotion. A good poem should make you feel something. If you read a poem and doesn't move you to any kind of emotion, doesn't leave you feeling, jealous or curious or angry or sad or hopeful, etc., then that doesn't mean it's a bad poem. It just means for you it's not effective. Someone else might read that poem and it might be one of the best poems they've ever read, and it may speak to them, very intimately. And this is the great thing about English, that different people can see different things in literature. And it's a lot of times based on our life experience. Someone could read a poem and they've gone through a very negative time in their life that the poem talks about a certain aspect of their life, and someone else may go through it and not have that negative feeling. Doesn't mean the one person's wrong. Okay? It just means that they've gone through life differently and they have different experience and they're seeing something different in that poem. This is what I love about English, the fact that you and I can feel something very different in what we're reading. The key is when you respond to the poem, it's very important that you explain why you feel the way you do. I can't tell you're wrong in the way you feel about something. So if you, like we talked a lot about the 3-step process in our last unit, if you answer the question, provide some proof, and explain why it is you feel that way. Like if you feel the persona of a poem is a certain thing, then explain why you feel that way. I will almost never mark you wrong if you do those 3 things, because it would be very arrogant for me to be able to tell you what you're feeling in the poem. So please keep that in mind in this unit, that really I want you to think about when you read these poems, think about what you're feeling as you read it and try to come up with, obviously the voice or the theme of the poem subject matter, what the author's trying to say should make you feel a certain way. And if you do feel a certain way, then, then come up and then explain that, certainly. Poetry is very effective, I think, in getting your emotions out and on a page. So we're going to take a look at kind of what we're doing. So here in the first lesson, you're introduced to the 6 poetic devices. You'll understand the difference between theme and topic in poetry. And you'll deconstruct 2 poems for the elements of poetry. And your learning goals, if you're able to understand the purpose of writing to inform and explain, apply the writing to inform and explain, know the 6 poetic devices, and you're going to complete the questions for 2 of the poems. So please remember to continue reading your section 2 of Death of a Salesman. Your section 2, so I believe that's up to page 70, should be complete today. And if that's not, get going on that, certainly. Hopefully you're close if you're not completely done. So please go ahead and do that. A little bit of information here on writing to inform and explain as opposed to express and reflect. One of my favorite authors is Rick Riley. He's a magazine writer, focuses a lot on sports. Here's a great article on his about NBA players and why they should save their money. It is very much this style of writing, this inform and explain style of writing. So go ahead and you can take a look at that. Don't really have to do anything with that, but please take a look at it and understand what that type of writing is. Sorry, I'm getting emails here. So the 6 poetic devices that we're going to be covering are voice. Voice is the exact same thing as theme in a short story. Persona, symbol, imagery, tone, and irony. So what I've done is I've given you a written explanation of each one of these things here in this Google document. So click on here. It will take you here. So just, kind of talks a little bit of what I said briefly at the beginning about, poetry being the language of emotion and how different people can see different things in poetry. The key, again, is that you're using examples from the poem to back up what you're saying in your opinion. I can never say you're wrong. If you say, this is what I see in the poem, here's the example of why I see it, and here's why that makes me feel it, then that's basically a 100% answer. It's very difficult, unless you talk about something from left field. Unless you see, it's a poem about love, and you say, well, I think it's some aliens from outer space. There's absolutely nothing in there to back up what you're saying. That's the only time I might say, well, I think you might be a little off there. But for the most part, if you explain why you feel the way you do, prove it, and then, give some background, that's an excellent answer. Poetry, one thing I want to talk about is it's kind of suffers from compression. In other words, it's like a short story or a novel, but it's really, really short. And because it's so short, poets absolutely agonize over words, punctuation, spaces between words, how long lines are, where lines go. It's extremely important for them that they get it perfect. So for us, we have to pay very special attention to all of those things. Every word in a poem is extremely important because poets don't want to go on and on and on. They're short, very concise snapshots of life that are designed to prove something. So when we read it, we have to be very careful. If there's a word in a poem that you don't understand, you have to look it up. We have computers. It's very easy for us to do that. Just Google the word, or you can obviously just, highlight the word, right click it, and then, explore, define the word here, and it'll give you the definition. So if there's ever a word in a poem you don't understand, please look it up, because that word might actually be the key to understanding the entire poem, or may unlock something for you to deconstruct in your poem. So the poetic devices, I've given them to you here. I will go through, and I've kind of gone through in pretty in-depth and given you some examples about what they mean. Irony of the 6 is the only one that is not in every poem. Some poems have it and some poems don't. I wanted you to take a look at it, because if you can find it in a poem, that's great. But for the rest, for voice, which is the theme of the poem, it's the same idea. But we see poetry as a living thing, so it has a voice and a person. Persona would be that person. Then you have to say what voice is. Basically, it's the most important one, very similar to theme. It is, what is the message or lesson the author is trying to say. Tone, just like in tone of voice, is what is the dominant emotion in the poem. So after you read the poem, what are you left feeling, or what do you feel the author wants you to feel about that poem? It has to be an emotion. It's got to be, hatred or joy or anger or love, etc. Something that is an emotion. Persona is a tough one. It's the one that asks you to be the most creative in the poem. It is, what character is the author assuming in the poem? What is the author pretending to be in the poem? And you can make this up. And the more creative you are with it, the better it's going to be. Symbols and imagery are, authors' particular use of words in poems. And finally, we have irony. And again, irony is the only one that's not in there. So please take a look. Also, you can take a look at these videos that are in the poem. I've given you a bunch, and then I've given you 2 poems to work on. Okay, so please do that. and enjoy.